Good morning to all our distinguished guests, honorary members, speakers, and delegates. My name is Keshni Naika. I'm a partner at Bowman's in Sandton, South Africa, and a newly appointed member of the Management Committee of the African Labour Law Society. It is an honor to co-MC this third African Labour Law Society virtual conference together with Professor Cynthia. Our next speaker is Ms. Cynthia Samuel-Olonjuwon. As already mentioned, she was appointed Assistant Director, General and Regional Director of the International Labour Organization for Africa with effect from 10 November 2017. Her topic is the impact of international norms on African countries. Thereafter, we'll be taking some questions for the speaker at around about 11 o'clock. I'm going to hand over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Honorable Mpubalopi, the Botswana Minister of Skill Development, Labour and Productivity Improvement and Employment. Great to see you again. Professor Stephen Van Eck, President of the African Labour Law Society. Professor Evans Kalula, Chairperson of the ILO Conference Committee on Freedom of Association, ILO colleagues, and I particularly recognize the Director of our Decent Work Team in Pretoria, Joni Musabayana, who roped me into this conversation this morning, and thank you so very much for doing so. All members of the African Labour Law Society, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and honor to address this African Labour Law Society Congress. This is my first time to meet with you, virtually though. And let me use this opportunity to underscore the importance which the ILO attaches to the mandate of the African Labour Law Society. We see the ALLS as a platform for labor lawyers across the African continent to network, collaborate, and share experiences on the practice of labor law in Africa, as well as the challenges encountered in its application. Labor law is anchored on the ILO's international labor standards, namely its conventions and recommendations. As you know, the labor laws are based mainly on three categories of labor standards. In these three categories are as follows: the core conventions. And these are the ones that cover freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining, elimination of child labor, prohibition of forced labor, as well as equality of opportunity and treatment in employment. So that's the first category, as I'm sure you all know. The second category of standards are the governance conventions. And this cover labor inspection, social dialogue, and tripartite consultations, as well as employment promotion. The third set of conventions, the third categories, are those we refer to as technical conventions. And in this case, I would like to particularly flag those conventions relating to occupational safety and health. And this is because I'm sure you are all aware of the ongoing conversation to have these sets of conventions included among the core conventions, thus making them part of the cluster of conventions that are seen as fundamental. According to our assessment, 47 African member states have ratified all the 8 core conventions. Out of this 47 who have ratified, 10 of them have also ratified the 2014 protocol to Convention 29, which, as you know, is on forced labor. 33 countries have ratified all the 3 main occupational safety and health conventions. while only 5 countries have ratified all the governance conventions. I compliment African states for this high rate of ratification, particularly of the core conventions. And this rate is one of the highest in the world within regions. However, we know that ratification is just a first step. With the ratification of the instruments, there has to be the domestication, the implementation of the principles that are contained in the conventions. And these have to be translated into national laws. And it is this domestication process that brings the ILO and its member states into dialogue and collaboration with the members of your society. I want to use this medium to acknowledge and thank your members who are assisting the ILO with labor law reforms in many of our countries in Africa, namely South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana, the Seychelles, Zimbabwe, and many, many, many of the countries where you have worked to support the ILO in strengthening the institutional and policy frameworks of our member states. And I would like to specifically pick out, acknowledge, and laud one of your own, Professor Evans Kalula, who for many decades has demonstrated exemplary dedication and support to labor law reforms in Africa. As an acknowledgement of his excellent work, he was appointed as the chair of the ILO Conference Committee on Freedom of Association. I'm sure you agree with me that this is a global acknowledgement and recognition of excellence from our own. I say thank you, Professor Kalula, for flying the flag very high and for making Africa very proud. Though you were not in the 340th session when the report of your committee was discussed, I'm pleased to let you know, Professor Kalula, that all the constituents who took the floor express deep appreciation for the exemplary manner that you are leading the committee. Again, my dear brother, thank you. We see the African Labor Law Society as a means of institutionalizing the support which Professor Kalula and many others like him, and I see that some of you are here attending this meeting. The support that you have provided in the promotion of international labor standards through labor law reform over the past many decades. In fact, I've worked with some of you in my previous capacities. This makes the Africa Labor Law Society a crucial institution in the promotion of international labor standards in Africa. I stand here today to confirm the ILO's commitment to deepen the collaboration between the ILO and ALLS. This collaboration is even more pertinent within the context of the response to COVID-19 and its impact on the world of work and the labor market. We have seen that COVID-19 has fast-tracked the future of work. Furthermore, COVID-19 has brought the imperative of occupational safety and health in the workplace to the very fore. As indicated earlier, COVID-19 has accelerated the processes of the future of work as articulated in the Global ILO Centenary Declaration, as well as the Continental 2019 Abidjan Declaration. And the formal title of that continental framework is Advancing Social Justice, Shaping the Future of Work in Africa. These frameworks provide the basis for the ILO support to enable member states not only respond to the crisis, but to create a brighter future of work in Africa. More specifically, the implementation plan of the Abidjan Declaration, which was approved by the 340th session of the ILO governing body, which ended last week, identifies the following 7 areas of work. And I emphasize them because it is on the basis of the 7 areas of work that the ILO in Africa collaborates with any partner, continental, sub-regional, or national. And these 7 areas are: 1, decent jobs for Africa, in particularly for young women and men. I won't go into the details of those areas, I'll just highlight them and we can take them in some more details if necessary. The second area is improved skills and enhanced technological pathways. The third, inclusive transformation for decent work in the informal economy as well as the rural economy. Conducive environment for sustainable enterprises is the fourth. The fifth is effective and inclusive tripartism and social dialogue. Sixth, enhanced social protection and labor protection for all, including labor migration. And the seventh, effective application of international labor standards and the promotion of gender equality. And in this, there will be special focus on Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor, because Africa, unfortunately, now is the poster child for the worst forms of child labor. And this has been exacerbated by COVID-19 and the measures taken to address the pandemic. We will also focus on other instruments like Convention 100, as well as Convention 190. This is in addition to all the other instruments that we're working on. As we can see, all these priority areas of work have implications for labor laws in the continent. For example, how will we address the implications of technological pathways for decent work? Automation, digitalization, mechanization, prevalence of teleworking, and the triangular employment relationships due to reorganization of work arrangements. The proliferation of the triangular employment relationship has witnessed a high rate of casualization of previously formal job categories. We're increasingly seeing the informalization of the formal economy. How do we deal with this within the context of legislation? It's also recognized that a rights-based approach is required for the acceleration of social protection coverage in Africa. As you well know, the current level of coverage of social protection in Africa, focusing on the most basic form, on just one of the most basic form, is 17.8%, 17.8%, the lowest in the world. And the target that we have set for ourselves in alignment with the African Union commitment that was adopted by heads of states is to have the level of coverage increased to 40% by the year 2025. In this regard, it is recognized that rights to social protection will have to be translated into entitlements and benefits and prescribed by national laws. All these processes and changes in the labor market have led to major and ongoing labor law reforms in Africa, and will also require that we revisit certain areas that have been overlooked in the past. The collaboration of the ILO with ALLS members in the provision of support to member states for major labor law reform is particularly important. even more important is the ongoing nature of labor law reform within the new normal of COVID-19. I therefore look forward to the ILO working more closely with the ALLS and with its individual members going forward. Considering that the ILO covers the entire continent of Africa as one region, and also looking at the fact that your remit as ALLS is continental, I would encourage the African Labour Law Society to increase its coverage, to make it really continental and really African, and thereby enhance the effectiveness of our collaboration. In this regard, we've taken notes that you have about 130 members across 19 member states. We particularly take note that you have membership across Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa. It is therefore imperative to extend your coverage, particularly to Central Africa, as well as Northern Africa. We also take due note that of your current membership, 16 countries are English speaking and 3 are French speaking. This imposes a responsibility to extend membership across all the linguistic groups in Africa. The extension of your coverage will enable you and your members to collaborate effectively with our 13 country offices, which are located in Abidjan, Abuja, Addis Ababa, Algiers, Antananarivo, Cairo, Dakar, Dar es Salaam, Harare, Kinshasa, Lusaka, Pretoria, and Yaoundé. We also have 4 decent work teams, which are based in Cairo, Dakar, Pretoria, and Yaoundé. And these 4 teams cover the 5 sub-regions of Africa. Cairo for Northern Africa, Dakar for Western Africa, Anglophone and Francophone, Pretoria for Eastern and Southern Africa, Anglophone and Francophone, while Yaoundé covers Central Africa, which is largely Francophone and Luxophone. And all these decent work teams house a diverse set of technical expertise, including those on labor law reform. ALLS members can and should cooperate with our experts in each of these decent work teams, as well as the directors of the country offices, to enable us better support our member states in labor law reform, and also to enable the society more effectively support the ILO in Africa to be able to deliver on those 7 areas of work that have been identified. Beyond the obvious work area relating to international labor standards, where the obvious synergies between the ILO and ALLS can be found, each and every one of the other 6 areas have significant areas where we can cooperate on. I already mentioned the issues around social protection, and that's an area where we see that we need to work better with the ALLS to ensure that the rights to social protection are guaranteed in law. Let me end by reiterating our availability as ILO from my office with responsibility for the whole of Africa, but also the 13 offices that are already listed earlier. We are ready and we are keen to collaborate effectively with ALSS to ensure that we have up-to-date labor law in Africa, not just in terms of the domestication of the instruments and the laws, but also support with the necessary measures for application. As we all know, Up-to-date labor law is a great foundation for effective labor market governance. I was given very strict instructions. Don't take too much time in your initial statement so that we'll have the opportunity to have a conversation. And I'd really love us to have a conversation around how we can work better together within the context in which we found ourselves. So I stop here and I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to a very rich conversation. Over to you, Madam Program Director.
Thank you very much. We still haven't received any questions on the chat, so I'm going to kickstart. Perhaps if you could let us know what are some of the mechanisms used by the ILO to get countries to buy in to the ILO norms and standards?
I do that all the time. I start talking and I forget that I haven't unmuted.
Sure.
To get used to the new normal. Thank you very much for that question. And I believe this is an area where a lot of the members of the ALLS, particularly those who've been working with us, are very, very conversant. But there are three ways. I'll look at this from three perspectives. First is the way that these instruments are developed. These are developed together. These are instruments that are developed with all our constituents. So the process of developing it is inclusive. And so right from that process of the development of the instruments, whether they are international labor standards, whether they are conventions or recommendations, these are done fully engaging the constituents. That ensures that there's buy-in. Of course, since there's negotiation, there is give and take. Not everybody may be happy with the outcome, but there's engagement at that level. And one example that I'll give is the process leading to the adoption of Convention 190. It was super, super inclusive, not just with the tripartite constituents, but we had a lot of civil society organizations that are not traditionally part of the conversation within the ILO who also contributed to this process. So there's that. But in addition to this, there are mechanisms to ensure that once countries do ratify these instruments, they are obliged to report on how they are implementing. And based on the reports and based on the assessment of where they are, there's follow-up. And part of the follow-up could be providing them with technical assistance. And we've seen in some very interesting cases where there has been like a 360-degree shift from governments based on the kind of engagement and technical support that has been provided. When I talked about the obligation to report based on ratified instruments, this is for all instruments except the fundamental principles and rights. So those core conventions, you are mandated to provide necessary reports on a regular basis. Then we do have ways of dealing with, there's the mechanism for ensuring compliance. Different mechanisms. I don't know if you want me to go into all those at the moment, but there is a system of supervision of the instruments that member states have ratified. And it goes really as high as getting the kind, it's really, really very, very structured and very effective. Let me stop there.
Great. I see we have two questions. I'm going to just read them out for you. We can do them one at a time. What role, and this is from Rotendo, what role can regional bodies like SADC and ECOWAS play towards ensuring ratifications and domestication of ILO norms?
Yep. Do you want to give me both, or you want to take them one at a time?
I can go. The next question is from Almarie Fourie, and the question is it not time for the ILO to revisit its tripartite structure?
Okay, that last question. Wow, that's a very heavy one. Okay, let me start with the first question, and thanks to the person who asked that question. And I'm sorry I didn't pick the name because I was trying to write it down. Very, very important and question and very important structures that are crucial, not just in terms of the ratification and implementation of ILO norms, but just in terms of the effective governance of the ILO itself and being more responsive to the needs of our member states in our tripartite constituents in those countries. And I'm happy you mentioned SADC and also ECOWAS. These are very, very important institutions, and I'll focus maybe more on SADC than ECOWAS. But whatever I say for SADC is relevant to all the other 7 regional economic communities that are recognized by the African Union. These regional economic communities have structures. One, they have structures that are tripartite. Second, they have structures that are at very high level, high policy levels. I'm talking about ministerial, I'm talking about heads of states. Third, before I go into the how, these structures are also part of the African Union structures for ensuring the effective translation of whatever policies are agreed at the level of the continent into reality at the national level. Now, what can they do in terms of norms? The first one is, particularly where they have established tripartite structures like SADC. SADC has a tripartite structure where the constituents come together and they're able to articulate an agenda, a longer term or medium term agenda as to where the subcontinent or the sub-region wants to get within a particular time. So within that framework, we find that SADC particularly has been very effective in making international labor standards a key part of what it wants to achieve, not just in terms of the standards in and of themselves, which are very important, but the relationship of the standards to other core priorities. So if I take labor migration, which is one of the priorities within the SADC sub-region, there are international labor standards that are very relevant here. Whatever it is that you take, and what SADC has done is to help effectively weave these international standards into the other priorities and to use moral suasion, to use the power that it has in convening these different member states and sharing experiences within the sub-region of what others have done, how they have done it. And we have excellent examples of how SADC has been very instrumental in the implementation of certain international labor standards, as well as in the ratification and the implementation of certain labor standards. In addition to that, when you have regional economic communities being very effective, in the situation where a member state from that sub-region, taking SADC as an example, has a problem with the committee, any of the standards review committees, they use the solidarity, as it were, to be able to encourage the member state to address this issue, provide support as and when needed, and we see that they have an important role. I talked about SADC, but it relates to ECOWAS, and there's so much more that I could say, but let me just stop here. On the revisiting ILO's tripartite structure, let me start by reminding all of us that this organization, ILO, is 101 years old, will soon be 102 years old, and its foundation is on tripartism. The door, the keys leading to the door, there are 3 keys. So tripartism is its DNA. And tripartism is its asset. It's actually part of what makes it unique within the UN family. So are we ever going to stop being tripartite? Very unlikely. Well, 2020 is what it is. Who would have imagined that 2020 would be like this? But it's absolutely unlikely to move from being a tripartite organization. Can we have work methods that make the organization engage with others that are outside of its tripartite structure? Yes, if we take labor migration, for example, or we take informality, these are issues that are broad and need a very wide engagement with other partners that may not necessarily be core to the tripartite partners. But what is happening, for example, on the informal economy is that the trade unions are taking this up. Employers' organizations are taking this up. This is a key priority for government. So they're bringing in those issues that were tangential to their initial concerns, and then seeing how they can work with other entities, but still within the context of tripartism. I know that within NEDLAC in South Africa, there's the tripartite plus. Is the ILO moving in that direction? Not now. I mean, there's been some discussions on this, and we have the recommendation that was, I was part of that committee about 10, 20 years ago when this was discussed, and there are very, very strong feelings on the part of our constituents to keep the ILO tripartite. If we have to engage with others, it should be within the context of the tripartite structure. Does that mean that we don't work with institutions like ALLS? Of course not, we work with them, but that doesn't in any way change the tripartite structure of the ILO. But thanks for that question.
Ms. Samuel-Olonjuwon, thank you for your time and for sharing your interesting views and ideas with us, particularly in regard to the greater collaboration between the ILO and the ALLS. Next, we have 2 interesting breakaway sessions which will be running in parallel. The sessions have been pre-recorded and will run for approximately 30 minutes each. Just a reminder to all of the delegates to please click on the relevant breakaway room at the top of the page in order to join the session. In breakaway 1, Ms. Julia Oli and Ms. Tshegetso Rabola will be discussing the 4th Industrial Revolution and its implications for labor regulations in Africa. They are both joining us from South Africa. Both speakers are associates in the Employment and Compensation Department at Baker McKenzie. In breakaway session 2, Dr. Almarie Fourie from the University of Johannesburg, South Africa, will be discussing extending protection to vulnerable informal economy workers through a human rights paradigm. Dr. Fourie has participated in various task teams, preparing legal opinions to government departments and drafting legislation for SADC countries. We're looking forward to engaging with you in those breakaway sessions.